Hi there, Cy Baron here with another Sam video for beginners guitar. We're going to look at chords and different ways of playing chords that you probably know already, but you know how to play them only one way. There are different ways of playing chords, basic chords I mean. I'm not talking about sevenths or ninths or diminished or augmented or anything silly like that. Talking about the basic chords and different ways that you might not know how to play them, which might in certain circumstances be easier. Let's look at, for instance, the chord G. Now we probably know how to play it like this with 3 fingers. Now that's a very useful way of playing it, and it's definitely a G, but in certain situations it might be easier to play a G with 2 fingers. How do we do that, you say? Like so. Now this is a G, but I'm doing something with the second string. This is an A, and when we play a G we play on the 2nd fret there. That's a B. That's the 2nd note of the chord G. But there's also a B there. That's the same note as that 2nd fret. So we don't actually need to play that note at all to get a G chord. So one way we can do that is just playing it with 2 fingers. 2nd string is being muted by this finger. So I'm holding down that note, but the string underneath, I've got my finger just resting on it. And that happens naturally when you put your finger on the top string there. You can just rest it across the string underneath. So you can hear this note, but that note is muted. So when you play the chord, you don't hear that. You just hear the notes of the G chord, which are G, and there's a D, and there's a G again, B, and a G. So there's 3 notes in the G chord: G, B, and D. And they're all represented by playing a chord like this. Now why would you want to play G with 2 fingers? Well, you've got these 2 extra fingers here which are now free and can do interesting things, like for example playing a G chord with a C chord. Now you see you've got a C chord essentially there, but we've got a G chord on top. That's actually a C chord with a G in the bass, and we'll come back to that idea because this is an inversion of a C chord. G and the C are 2 chords which often go together, and so playing the G like this and then playing the C like this makes things very easy, and it helps on the guitar because you can play fast rhythms with the G and the C, like so. Which sound really good. So that's one thing you can do with the G chord. Let's look at another chord. Now we've got the C chord. One thing about the C chord is that this note, the low string, the E string, although it does belong in the C chord, you don't always want to, well, you hardly ever actually want to play that string when you strum the C chord. I mean, it actually doesn't sound too bad, but it's generally frowned upon. Probably because that note is a little bit too low. And we have the high E. The C chord is made up of the notes C, E, G. So this E is actually a legitimate note for a C chord, but it's a little bit too low. We've got an E down here. We've also got an E here. So we really don't want another low E. And anyway, this low note rattles about too much with the C chord. It can work in certain situations, but you don't always want to hear that note. So when we're strumming, we tend to say to students, just strum from the 5th string. But that's a little bit tricky, and it gets tedious after a while, thinking about you have to strum from the 5th string and not all the way across. But one thing you can do with the C chord is play it with 4 fingers. Let's have a look at this. So you've got 3 fingers on at the moment, but what you can do is move this finger up to the G position and put a finger underneath for the C note, and you get a chord which is 4 fingers on, like this. And that note, the G, goes very well with the C chord. We've just seen it with the last G chord. But this C with 4 fingers is a really nice chord, and you'll see a lot of acoustic guitar players who strum the guitar will play the C chord like that. It gives you a lot more control over the sound than if you just are playing the C like this with the low E, because it means you can directly deaden it like that. Whereas if you've got the E going, you have to put a finger on, something like that. It's not so easy. And it also sounds fuller. It's got a much fuller sound. You know, the reason we love the E minor chord, it's got that really full sound. Well, this C chord with 4 fingers on also sounds full, because you have that G note. C chord, as I say, is made up of C, E, G. The G is the 5th, and it's a legitimate note for the chord. So that's a really nice way of playing a C, if you're not playing it like this. Let's quickly look at the A chord. When you learn the A chord, you generally learn it with 3 fingers on the fretboard, something like that. That's a really good way of playing it, because you can take one of the fingers off and get an A7. But for people like me who are playing narrow-necked guitars and have got big fat fingers, it's not so easy to stuff all those fingers on that one fret position with 1 finger above the other, like so. So what I tend to do is I play the A chord with 1 finger, like this. And it also helps because I can put my thumb over the top and deaden that string. That's the E string. Now the A chord actually features an E in it. It's A, C sharp, E. So you could strum the A chord like so, but that low E, again, as with the C chord, sounds a bit funny. It's a little bit too prevalent. We often don't want it. So if you do play the A like this with 1 finger, it's very easy to just get your thumb right over the top of the neck and just lightly touch, not pressing down, but just resting your thumb on that string, which again deadens it. So when you strum, you only hear that second note, which is the A, and you get a really nice A sounding chord. So how do you do this A chord with the finger just across? Well, what you really want to hear is not just those 3 notes, but also that note. So you're not pressing all the way down on all of those 4 strings. That's actually an A major 7. You don't want an A major 7, you want an A. So what you do, you're sort of pressing first joint of your finger onto the guitar like this, so your finger bends and the high E note passes underneath. Let's take a close look at that. So I'm not doing this where I'm pressing all the way down. I've got my finger bent. So you see this note here, this string, rings underneath rather than either dead or pressing down on it. So you can hear this note ringing underneath. And the way you do that is by pressing down hard across 3 strings. Now this is something which takes a little bit of time to get used to, but it's worth cultivating it and practicing, because it's actually a really nice way of playing the A chord. Why is it nice? Well, for a start, you can get your thumb over the top. deaden that low E string. But also it means you've freed up these fingers. These fingers can do other things on top of the A chord. If you're playing with 3-finger A chord, you can't really do much other than add a little finger and make it into an A sus, which is nice. But if you're playing with 1 finger, you can add extra fingers. You can add 2 fingers, certainly, to make a really nice A sus, which sounds much better. You can even add a finger here, get a really full sounding chord. So it just frees up these fingers basically. What about the D chord? There's your basic bog standard D, that's fine, but again you often don't want to hear either the A string, or certainly you don't want to hear the E string, so you're trying to strum just these 4 strings. Well, that's fine, but if you're really bashing away at the guitar, it's not so easy. So another thing you might want to do with the thumb here is again bring it over the top, and again you don't have to press down, you just want to rest it on the top so it deadens it, and then you can get that sound rather than this sound, which is a little bit too muddy. It just makes it easier to hit the strings that you want to hit, so you can play the guitar in a sloppier fashion, but it doesn't sound so sloppy because you've got this string muted. Now another thing you can do, instead of just muting that string, is actually fret a note, and the note you want to fret is this, the second fret on the low E string. You can actually do that with your thumb. Again, you need either large hands or dexterous thumbs to do this, but it's something to think about and perhaps to try. If you can get your thumb right over the top and just press down, you don't need to press down very much, you'll find, just lightly touching it really, as long as you get it quite near to the fret here, you'll find you'll be able to fret it. That note is an F sharp, and F sharp is in the D chord. The D chord is D, F sharp, A. So that's the third or the second note of the D chord. So it turns that chord into an inversion again. You don't need to really worry about what an inversion is, but it's the first inversion of the D chord. Sounds like that. I'll show you one more thing that's interesting with a D chord in relation to a C chord. Now, you may know in the alphabet that a D comes directly after a C, and what that means on a guitar is that the D chord comes just after the C chord. You play a C chord the way I showed you before with 4 fingers on, you could then go to the D chord. You've got to change all your fingers like that, or you could realise that D comes just after C. What that means on the guitar is that you can slide this just up. There's a C, slide up 1, slide up 2, and there you've got a D. It's an interesting D chord because you have a note here, E, and you have a note here, G, both of which don't really go in the D chord. It still sounds nice. Has a sort of unresolved sound to it, but it's nice moving from the C to that D. Look. Anyway, there are songs that use that D to the C, like Sugar Mountain by Neil Young, if you want to go away and listen to that. Anyway, it's just a few ideas with chords for making them either easier or harder in some instances to play. In different contexts, you want to be able to think about the way you're playing the chord and adapt it to the song that you're playing. Don't just rely on playing the chord you know in the way that you know it. Sometimes it helps to think about the song and the chord and perhaps adapt the chord to better suit the song that you're playing and the style that you're playing it in. Okay, thanks a lot. See you next time. Bye.